back at the end of 2019, and I haven't used these non-radar procedures since then, basically. So what I'm going to be going over right now is I thought I would have this little discussion with that would open to basically the VAT USA community here, because there was a lot of concepts that I wish I had known going into the academy that I did not know, because there's such a lack of understanding and training on non-radar concepts and procedures before actually going to the academy. So that's what I'm going to do here today. I'm only going to be teaching this, and I don't know if you could even really call it teaching. We're just going to discuss it on the terms of the academy. And what you do after the academy is you go to your facility. And if your facility does any kind of non radar type controlling or procedures, they're going to reteach you how to do it their way. So you first have to pass the academy, then you go to a facility. They tell you to forget everything at the academy, and here's how you actually do it. So the academy is also in the works, from my understanding, of getting rid of the en route portion of non radar to begin with. And they're going to go just to arrivals and departures for non radar, which I have to be honest, I'm in favor of, because that's the only time that you actually even apply non radar procedures in the real world. There's a few exceptions to that, of course, but they're far and few between. So today we're going to go over a few of those. Let's see. One of the biggest ones was when I went to the academy and we started practicing, like after school or after the class and everything. We went to this little training lab that had a bunch of flight strips and boards and like a big clock that you could pause and continue going. And it was basically separating space and time. The concept of not separating aircraft directly was kind of foreign to me. And we did it just with flight strips. And it was actually a little funny side story is one of my good friends from here on VATSIM, I sent him a picture of like the flight strip bay and the clock, and he wrote back like, "Ha, where is your radar scope though?" And I only responded back with a ha, thinking he was joking. Come to find out later on, he was serious. He didn't understand how you could separate aircraft using just flight strips. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. What you're seeing right now is the Academy map as it was in February of 2019. They are changing this a lot with the new procedures coming, hopefully in the at the end of 2022, where they get rid of non-radar en route. But if they've made any changes to the map since then, it's probably not too great. It's not too significant. Just to give you a basic understanding of what we're looking at here, Jackson Low is this little I don't even know what you would call this shape here, but it's this, and you have this little chimney here, and there you go. Below you have non-radar approach controls. For example, this is Jackson Approach. They own 5,000 and below. And then this is Monroe Approach, and they own 6,000 and below. Since I wanted to make this a little bit more of a discussion, can you tell me the difference between, fundamentally, really, the difference between the intersection hater here? By the way, can you guys see my mouse really well?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Uh, the difference between hater and say Yazoo here. Can you kind of tell me what the difference is between these two? Anybody? Take a guess. Nope. Okay. Well, uh, nobody wants to guess? There you go. Good. Yeah, so the filled in one is the compulsory reporting point, is by definition what it's called. But that's basically exactly what it is. If the person, or I'm sorry, the pilot is not under radar services, meaning they either never heard the words radar contact, or they heard radar services terminated, or radar contact lost. At that point, the pilot must then report the time that they progress this waypoint. So if they, you know, they were over Hader at 12:03, and then they couldn't get a word in edgewise until they were right about here, they would still report progress Hader at 12:03. And these points that are hollow, you don't have to do it. You'll also notice that nav aids, at least at the academy, all the nav aids are compulsory reporting point. The little filled in bubble there is the compulsory reporting point. Now, where does this come into play? What we do is, and please take this with a grain of salt, but what we're doing is we're actually separating time and space, not exactly the aircraft. So if the aircraft reported progressing Monroe Vortac and the next reporting point on their flight plan is Hayter, you know that they're somewhere between Monroe and Hayter, but it's very difficult without an actual position report of that exact time to prove where they are right now. So what you do is you protect this entire segment in a sense. Now there's a few exceptions to that, and they'll probably talk more about that either later or at the academy itself. And after they progress Hayter, you now no longer have to protect this area behind them. Now you're protecting from Hayter to Jackson, so on and so forth. And by the way, if at any moment you have a question or I don't make sense, please jump in and to let me know. I really don't want this to be a class. I want to be a discussion. Now, how do we do this? Well, what they kind of do is, see if we can get this here. They will break your airspace up into spots. So, as I said earlier, this is, I'm going to do a generic outline here. This is your airspace here, okay? And what they'll do is they'll break this up into segments. So basically from here to there, this is the Sidon Bay, the SQS Bay is what they're talking about. And we'll talk more about what that actually means later. And then what was the other one? The Vicksburg Bay, maybe? I'm not really sure about that one, but basically it kind of comes down like this. And then this would be the Jackson Bay, and this would be the Vicksburg Bay because it has Vicksburg in it. So this is kind of like your area names almost, but this is a single sector broken up into 3 different bays. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about the actual flight strip bay. There we go. Now, forgive the handwriting and the scribbled out. You're not allowed to scribble anything out. This was me just practicing basically my first day and wanting to tear my hair out. So over here, you have the Vicksburg Bay, VKS, the Jackson Bay, and the Sidon Bay. And if I zoom in just a little bit, you'll actually see that there's multiple flight strips sometimes for the same aircraft. I know it's cut off here, but this is November 210 Delta Charlie in the Vicksburg Bay. Then you see them again over here in the Jackson Bay. And what's going on here is you only separate, for the most part, you issue crossing restrictions, altitude restrictions, and all sorts of other things based off of the traffic that's only in that bay. So 0 Delta Charlie is traffic right now for 77 Zulu and 03 Bravo. You're not really worrying about these other aircraft just yet. You issue restrictions to keep them clear of this traffic in this bay. Then you have this other flight strip that you analyze for this bay as well. And then sometimes you'll have a third strip over here where he goes all the way through your airspace. But in this case, he exits your airspace at the Jackson Bay. Any questions so far? I've been doing nothing but just talking right now. And guys, feel free to like unmute. I would really rather like a discussion here.
Yeah, I mean, for me right now, I'm just listening and just trying to comprehend everything. I don't really have any questions right now. I'm just trying to take it all in.
Okay, awesome. Well, there we go. So this is the bay, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these flight strip markings here very shortly. Let's see what else can I show you here. We have the. Well, there you go. I'll tell you what. We'll just go ahead and start on the whole idea of separating traffic. So we have this scenario here. We got 2 aircraft at. Oops. So we have 2 aircraft here at whatever altitude. They're coming together. They're converging in on the same waypoint. And what we have to do is they're at the same altitude. So we have to issue a crossing restriction to one of these aircraft long before they get to Boise in order to separate them vertically. And what we have, thankfully, the FAA has given us a table that's actually in the 711065. It's in 6 5 1, and it matches the table number as well. So basically, what this is saying is if the aircraft is not DME capable, the number of degrees that are apart from the convergence point, this is the amount of distance away from that point that they are still safely separated. So, if, for example, let's say 15 degrees is 16 miles for this, whatever you want to call this, this is the safe distance from it. And we're going to go back to this. Let's say that the difference between these two radials, which they're not, but let's just say for simplicity right now is 15 degrees. That means 16 miles out, one of these aircraft have to be level at another altitude so that they are safe from each other when they get even a split second closer to this nav aid. So the way we would do that is say November 123 cross 16 miles northwest of Boise Vortac, add and maintain flight level 230 or whatever other altitude would be sufficient to separate them from this traffic. Any questions there so far?
Can I ask one thing right quick?
Sure.
What training is this?
This is a it's not much of a training. It's kind of just a discussion,
Oh, okay.
primarily geared towards people who are wanting to go to the FAA en route and they want to prepare themselves for the academy. I'm teaching a hard to understand concept called non-radar. So
Oh,
yeah,
makes sense. I was asking because I don't know how they do the group training or whatever. It's a little bit
gotcha.
confusing to me.
Well, this is kind of a discussion in here, so pipe in if you want. But so there you go. We've already technically started those, so we're going to continue rolling now. So anyway, so yeah, that's how we would issue that restriction. Number 123 cross, and then we would figure out where the degrees was. So how many ever degrees it is apart from the other aircraft, that many miles away from the convergence point. Cross that many miles away from it at this altitude that deconflicts. Then you have another table with DME capability. So these non-DME points are really just for you as a reference as a controller. You would actually probably have to issue a crossing point. So, like we were talking about earlier, we have these little points here, intersections that are not DME reliant. So, for example, GELMI is DME reliant. You cannot identify GELMI unless that aircraft has DME to say that they're 35 miles away from ooh, it's been a while. GLH. Anybody know what that is? Greenwood? Nope, Greenwood's over here. Greenville, maybe? I don't know. Anyways, GLH. So 35 miles from GLH is GELMI, but you don't know that as a pilot unless you have DME equipment. So that wouldn't be able to be used. However, something like Yazoo could because you could identify it without DME. It's the intersection between the Sidon 186 radial and the Jackson 335 radial. So you would issue a crossing restriction to somebody at number 123 cross Yazoo at flight level 230, so on and so forth. Now, if they do have DME, which most aircraft do in some shape or fashion, this is what you normally operate in. Degrees divergence of 15 degrees, and they're below flight level 180. That's 17 miles from the crossing point or from the convergence point. If they're at flight level 180 to flight level 450, kind of just add a mile to that. And then when you get a little bit further down, you notice that it's always 11 miles. And that has to do with slant range, which I'm not really here to teach. So you can learn that in basics when you're wanting to fall asleep watching PowerPoints. So there you go. Any questions so far about this? We're going to go into strip marking and actually practice some of these here in just a minute. All right. Now, how do we do some of these? All right. So each of these boxes have certain information that's tied to it. And please forgive me, I'm a little rusty on some of the strip marking here. So this box is pretty self-explanatory. Everything you need to know about the capabilities of the aircraft, who they are, what they're doing. Then you have I'm going to skip this box for a second, the current fix, okay, or the posting fix, I think is what they call it. In this case, it's Jackson Hole. Not Jackson Hole, I'm sorry. I'm from the Salt Lake area, so Jackson Hole jumps to mind, but Jackson Vortac. And this is going to usually be, if I remember correctly, when it comes to the bay name, it's going to be one of the reporting points, the mandatory reporting points in that bay. So we're in the Jackson Bay, and it just so happens that the current fix is Jackson for every one of them, but it doesn't have to be that way. For example, in the Vicksburg Bay, we have Hayter and Dortz, which are mandatory reporting points in the Vicksburg area. In this case, number 210 Delta Charlie is estimated that they would reach Jackson Vortac at the current time in 20 minutes. So if the current time is 00 or 01 or 02, it would be estimating Jackson Vortac at 0120. If it if it's the current time, I'm sorry, if it's the current hour, you don't have to write the hours there. Then our center estimate says that based on all the math that we've done, based for where he was located, his filed true airspeed, etc., we're expecting him to be crossing Jackson Vortac at 0036 Zulu. And then this little number here is the time he actually progressed the Jackson Vortac. So that comes into play a lot later. This box here is any altitude information that needs to be issued or reported, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then this is the route remarks would be down here. And then we write various other information over here. Now, knowing that this box right here is the current fix posting, this one that's right before it is the previous fix posting. So if you can see that he crossed Hayter at 0020. And obviously, I'm realizing now I made this mistake while practicing. I probably wrote down that he was estimating Jackson at 20, but mistakes happen. Then the next bay or the next reporting point that we're looking for is going to be on this one here, the one you would think it would be right after it, but FAA logic, it's not. So the current fix posting, previous fix posting, and the next fix posting. Excuse me just a moment. All right, really sorry about that. And then we write down when he's estimating. I think this waypoint was called meridian. He's estimating meridian at 0055. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the strip markings if there's no questions there about what all this really means. In this case, this aircraft was told to maintain 8,000 until 14 miles northeast of Monroe, then climb and maintain 9,000. Why do you think we would tell them to maintain the current altitude until a certain distance?
Separation.
Separation is one of them, sure. Separation from other aircraft, that would be one of them. But mainly, this one, maintain, remember this, it says maintain 8,000 till 14 miles northeast of Monroe. And he is from Monroe, Victor 427, then to Jackson. So 427. Let's go look at that map again.
Even the more interesting thing is he's heading 8,000 opposite direction of flight.
Yeah, true. They'll usually APREC that because if they have traffic, they'll APREC IOFDOF, which you can say it that way, by the way. Inappropriate altitude for direction of flight, IAFDOF. Through landline coordination, it's IOFDOF. Even though real world, they still call it wrong way. But yeah, at the academy, they want you to say IOFDOF. All right. So we told them, so we know that he came from Monroe. He's taking Victor 427 to Hayter, then to Jackson. So if this is the first time we're speaking to him, we want, and we know that he's requesting 9,000 because I forgot to mention that. And I do apologize for going all over the place. Like I said, this is not a actual lesson plan here. The little red up arrow with a niner means that he's requesting 9,000. So chances are the previous sector called us, APREC the IOFDOF, and told us that he's requesting 9,000, or the aircraft checked in and told us that they're requesting 9,000. Either way, we know he wants to go to 9,000, and that's appropriate altitude for direction of flight, like Austin pointed out there. So he's coming from Monroe, Victor 427 Jackson. He's at 8,000. He wants 9,000. And if you remember earlier, our airspace starts right here on this line where I'm moving my mouse. You notice anything similar there? Any reason why we would have told him to maintain 8,000 until 14 miles northeast of Monroe?
That's the beginning of your airspace.
Yep, he's got to enter the airspace. This little mileage right here, or these numbers and these diamonds, we I don't know if they're actually called diamond mileages, but that's what we all referred to them as. Excuse me. These help identify where your airspace actually exists. But it always has to be on some kind of radial or some kind of nav aid, something that you can definitively identify. So in this case, our airspace starts at 14 miles northeast of Monroe. And it's northeast because the heading is, or I'm sorry, the radial is 072. This is kind of interesting. What would you call this? How would you say this probably? The 15 miles.
I'd say it's still northeast because it's not 090.
That's exactly what I was getting at. Good. The academy, the only east there is exactly 090. If it's 089 or 091, it is not east. It's either northeast or southeast. And they do that to just make you demonstrate that you understand the difference. I don't know really why, but it is what they do. So if the aircraft is somewhere between Monroe and Hayter, we can't prove where he's at. And if he didn't give us an exact position report saying, hey, we're 11 miles northeast of Monroe, or we're 15 miles northeast of Monroe, if he didn't say that for whatever reason, then we have to assume he's at every position along this route before Hayter. So we will tell him maintain 14,000, I'm sorry, maintain 8,000, because that's where he's already at, until 14 miles northeast of Monroe. Climb and maintain 9,000. So he'll maintain that 8,000 until he's in our airspace, then he can start to climb up. Any questions there? All right. Then we start looking at getting aircraft down into Greenwood, Jackson Hole, and so on and so forth. Let's take a look at this. Knowing what you just heard there, I'm going to tell you that that's a 7-0 with a down arrow, okay? Anybody want to take a crack at this one? And SQS is Sidon.
Maintain 1,000 until 24 miles northwest of site, and then decide to maintain 7,000.
Very close. You will say these individually at the academy until 24 miles northwest of Sidon, not 24. You can't group them in those cases there, even though they do it real world all the time. This one happens to have a secondary crossing restriction. So This one is very, very good, by the way. Maintain 1,000 until 24 miles northwest of Sidon. Cross 5 miles southeast of Sidon at or above 10,000. Descend and maintain 7,000. Does that make sense?
Does it make sense? Yes. Does it also make sense? No.
All right, let's take a look at that. What it all meant. So, yeah, I like it.
It's very peculiar.
Yeah, I agree. So, let's see who's going to be there first. So this guy is arriving into Greenwood, which we're gonna. Oh, I'm sorry, he's actually arriving Jackson, but he's coming from the north on Victor Niner, and he'll be crossing Sidon before this guy, 1 minute before this guy. So Delta 311 will be crossing Sidon 1 minute prior to November 23 Golf Tango. November 23 Golf Tango is landing Greenwood. Delta is landing Jackson Hole. Let's go take a look at that. I hope I don't make a fool of myself because I have not really studied this before doing this. I probably should have for your guys' benefit, so I do apologize again. So the first restriction, maintain, what was it, 1,000 he was at? Yeah. So this first one kind of makes sense already because he's on Victor Niner coming down to Sidon, okay? So maintain 1,000 until 24 miles northwest of Sidon. Then what was it? It was, maintain. Then there was another one that said to cross Sidon, right?
5 southeast at or above 10, I think.
5 southeast. All right, yep, because Victor Niner continues on the 171 radial, so that'll be over here until 5 miles southeast, and then descend and maintain 7,000 because he needs to get down to 7,000 for these Jackson Hole arrival, or not Jackson Hole, I'm sorry, Jackson arrivals. And without looking any further, I'm sure it's because of traffic down here somewhere. So let's take a look at what that actually means. They give you this really cool thing. Instead of having to memorize this degrees divergence table, they give you this really awesome quick reference map. And it basically has a summary of everything you would need to know on a single sheet of paper, and there's a back space for it as well. This back side, we'll talk about, here it is, here's the back side of it. So we were just looking at Sidon. So he's coming in on Victor Niner here, and then going down here, okay? And this little gray area here is the holding pattern at Sidon protected airspace. Then you see this little 8 here, 7, 7, 14 at times if they go missed approach. 7, 5, 7, and then over here it's 17 miles. These are kind of like the diamond mileages that identify where this holding pattern protected airspace is, so you know how to give crossing restrictions accordingly. So say you have somebody holding in the pattern here, and we needed to miss them at, stand by just a moment. What did you say? Cross 5 miles southeast at or above. Yeah. All right. So in this case, imagine we have an aircraft holding at 9,000 in this airspace. And we need to get this guy who's at 11,000 down to 7,000. We're going to tell him to maintain his current altitude until he's in our airspace. That was that 14 miles northwest of Sidon. Then we're going to tell him he needs to maintain 1,000 feet above this holding aircraft at 9,000. So that's the 10,000, right? I hope I'm not losing anybody. And then we need him to maintain that 10,000 until he's 5 miles south of Sidon to miss that protected airspace. Then after he's past that, then he can just go ahead and descend on down to 7,000. Does everybody have the picture of what's going on here? We have this guy.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm going to draw it out just in case. So we got this guy at 11,000 here. we want him to maintain that 11,000 until like he gets into our airspace, which is 14 miles. Let's call it. Forget I'm not drawing. That's 14 miles northwest of Sidon. Then when he gets into our airspace, we want to go ahead and get him started down because, uh, you know, whatever, safe, efficient, orderly flow of traffic. But we have aircraft circling in here at 9,000. And we're like, well, we can't descend them down to 7,000 yet. So we're going to get him down to 10,000 until he's right here at the southern edge of this holding pattern. Once he gets there, then we can descend him down to 7,000 here. Any questions? All right. Time to get into degrees divergence. Give me a second while I draw this up. You have aircraft 1. Then you have aircraft 2. Both go into Jackson Hole. I keep saying Jackson Hole. I do mean Jackson. And they're at the same altitude. Let's say that they are at 6,000 each of them. And they're going to arrive at Jackson within a time frame that considers them conflicted. So let's go ahead and call it just at the exact same time. How would we figure out how many miles away do we tell one aircraft to descend or climb to a different altitude? Does
45 degrees divergence on the radial. So can you go back to the chart?
Yep, so there's 45 degrees there. All right, I unfortunately have to get rid of that to get back to the chart. There we go. And they're below 180, right? And
so 7 miles. 7 miles prior to Jackson, someone has to be lower.
there you go. So what's really cool though is at the academy, they give you the backside of this. Oops. Not sure why it says 8 here. Oh, that's right, because it's 44 miles. I'm sorry, 44 degrees. They have the degrees divergence table here. Everything you're doing at the Academy non-radar is below level 180 to make it simpler. And even more simpler than that, they give you these little yellow boxes here. And it's in between each of the different routes, showing you how many miles you would have to tell that aircraft to cross. In this case, 8 miles. So 8 miles northeast of Jackson, add and maintain. Then you start thinking, okay, well, what if the aircraft is on Victor 9er and the other one is on Victor 245? There's no thing in between here. They have these little color-coded ones. So between these two routes, it's 6 miles. Make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and do a little practice here. November 1, November 2, and they're both at 6,000. And then what I'm going to do is write down the restriction you tell them. So, Austin, go ahead, since you're the one so active in here. You want to go ahead and give either November 1 or November 2 a crossing restriction to miss each other?
Is there required altitude or just assume 4,000?
So that's a good question. When you go to the academy, they want you to demonstrate minimum separation. So one aspect of that is the degrees divergent mileage. If you know that 8 and all this and stuff is the required restrictions, you could think like, well, the highest restriction is 17. So if I always tell somebody to cross 17 miles northwest of something at another altitude, I know I'm going to be good for all of them. You'll actually get counted off like points for that. It's over restricting. The same thing goes for altitude. If you only need 1,000 feet, but you make them cross something 2,000 feet, then that's 1,000 feet of over restriction. You get counted off. So do it just at the bare minimum. Don't worry about IOFT yet.
Uh, November 2, cross 6 miles northeast of Jackson at 5,000. Or you said don't worry about IOFT?
Yeah, don't worry about IOFT. So that's fine.
Just call it 5,000 then.
There you go. So that's what you would write on the strip. 6 or X6 space NE. And since Jackson would be the current fix, you don't actually have to write out Jackson. You can if you want, but you don't have to if it's the current fix in the flight strip. And then the altitude, 5,000. That's simple. However, what if we did want to worry about IOFT? Can you get them down to 4,000?
Can you pull up the MEA map?
Oh, screw them MEA. Yeah, just send them down to 4,000. How would you
Yeah.
issue this with 4,000?
Cross 6 miles northeast of Jackson at 4,000.
So that would be 1,000 foot of over restriction. You would do exactly what you did, except afterwards say descend and maintain 4,000, and then
Okay,
that
so
would go
cross
up
6
here.
miles northeast at 5, descend and maintain 4.
There you go.
Okay.
So you issue the minimum amount of restriction to ensure safety, then orderly and expeditious flow of traffic. That comes afterwards. So you can think of it like that. Well, this was simpler than I thought it was going to be. So, anyways, any questions from anybody else that I've been going over this with? We'll talk about more complicated subjects here in just a minute, but from this
So
point on,
at the academy, what's the time frame that they require as too close?
as too
Or
close.
you have to issue a
Oh, the
restriction?
time. Yep, that's really good.
What's the time frame for the academy that they say is the limit?
So for crossing or same direction aircraft, 10 minutes. And 10 minutes is 10 minutes. So there is no ambiguity. That's kind of one of the things that I liked about non-radar is there was zero ambiguity about it. So if, for example, this person, American 290, was going to be estimating Jackson at 0033, and the next aircraft was going to be estimating Jackson at 43, they are separated. It doesn't matter if this aircraft is faster than this one. It does not matter. 10 minutes is 10 minutes. It does matter if they're at the same altitude and same course, but beyond that, if it's crossing traffic or they split off after Jackson,
Because it's
they're
divergence
fine.
traffic
They're
or
diverging.
converging.
Yep. So 10 minutes is 10 minutes. In fact, there's a thing called a TR. I think it's a, what is it? Training review, or I forgot what it's called, but if you're in a test and you feel like you applied the appropriate separation or the appropriate crossing restriction, etc., and the instructor or evaluator marked you off for that, you can go and do a TR and challenge the ruling. And if you end up being right, which it's surprising, the students are right more often than not. So whenever you go and challenge things, chances are you're going to win, because generally speaking, you know this stuff better than the actual evaluators. Douglas, if there's any way for you to cut that out, I'd appreciate that with the recording there. But yeah, you know this better than they do, for the most part. So I actually got to do that. I had crossing traffic, not opposite direction traffic. Which opposite direction traffic, I'll go ahead and tell you now, time does not matter. You need to separate them immediately if they're opposite direction traffic. You cannot rely on their estimate times for the converging point. So, and there's ways to do that, and we might talk about it later. If not, they'll teach you at the academy. Excuse me. But so yeah, there it is. Crossing traffic or same direction traffic. 10 minutes is 10 minutes. The time that the speed comes into play is if they're going to continue on the same route. Then you got a problem. Then you start fixing it with altitude and stuff, but you'll be fine until that waypoint though. All right, what was I going to say now? Oh yeah, so there you go. So from this point, imagining that they're all at the same altitude, who is in conflict with American 290? Imagining they're all at the same altitude.
0 Delta Charlie.
0 Delta Charlie, correct. One more. And Delta 311, yep. He's, what is that, 8 minutes away. However, number 6 Quebec is more than 10 minutes, so he's fine. So the way they teach you to organize your flight strip bay is kind of based on that to help identify things. You, unfortunately, if they're still doing it the way they were doing it when I was there, they give you a sheet of paper with all these flight strips. You have to tear them all apart. Then you have to load them into the actual flight strip holders. And then you have to put them in the appropriate bays in the appropriate order. And if I remember correctly, they told you to first put the aircraft that's going to arrive at the coordination point, or I'm sorry, the fixed posting point on the bottom, then the next guy, then the next guy, and the next guy based on time. If you got 2 aircraft that are arriving there at the exact same time, you put the lower altitude on the bottom, the higher altitude on top. And this helps with your quote unquote scan. This helps you scan for traffic a lot easier and keep your bay organized, which is why Delta 311 is on the bottom here, even though he was higher and arriving further along than Greenwood here. So this helps you with your scan and helps you see traffic and write restrictions to miss that other traffic. Then you got aircraft up here in the suspense bay. Anything above the fixed posting strip is considered a non-active flight plan. These are the guys who have filed a flight plan, but either have not received a clearance yet, or actually, yeah, that's what it is. It's aircraft who have not been given a clearance. In this case, Greenwood Radio is the flight service station that they, well, actually, now I think they're calling it Jackson Flight Data or Aero. What's it called? What's their center called at the academy? Aero Center. There it is. Aero Center Flight Data. When Aero Center Flight Data calls you and says, what would they say? Jackson Low Aero Center Flight Data clearance request. And then you'll be like, okay, go ahead. And they'll say, I think they even say at Vicksburg in suspense. That lets you know, like, hey, go up here. November 777 X-ray request clearance from Vicksburg Airport to, I think that's El Dorado Airport. You would then take that strip and bring it down to, I think it's the bottom of the bay. And then you issue them the traffic as needed. In this case, we had to actually do a little bit, getting a lot of people in here now. But in this case, we actually.
This last night, Kyle. I actually told people to show up last night.
You did? Oh yeah, it was Monday. I don't.
Well, Anthony's been doing his thing on Sunday, so this is not the same thing then. Huh?
No, it's not. This was something I was going to do privately for a friend of mine, but I decided to go ahead and do it for anybody who wanted to sit in. So all is good though.
Cool.
However, we covered a majority of the material already, unfortunately. But I'll stick around hopefully, and we'll talk more about this when we're done.
Oh, real strips. That's cool.
Yeah. So in this case, I had to bring him down, number 777 Zulu, and I was not ready to issue the clearance first because I had to do coordination with the next sector. So I told the flight service, I was like, all right, number 777 Zulu, expect departure clearance 0030, which is like 10 minutes from that point. I think they called at 20. I then called the next controller, which is, I have no idea. Yep, they were going to Monroe. So the next controller would have been Monroe Low. And I would have said, at Monroe, because they have a Monroe base. So I have to say, at Monroe, APREC, November 777 X-ray, climbing to 8,000 via Victor 417 direct Monroe. Then they say number 777 Zulu, approved as requested, and I may have missed some other stuff such as like maybe an estimate time or something. It's been a while. And then I call back to flight service and I'm like, hey, clearance for number 777 Zulu. They say, go ahead. Then I would say, this is fun. I haven't done this in a minute. So November 777 Zulu cleared from Vicksburg Airport to El Dorado Airport. I would then put a DA there, D-A, which means depart fix, arrive fix. Cleared from Vicksburg Airport to El Dorado Airport via T, depart northeast, turn left, fly heading 330 until joining Victor 417. Victor 417, Monroe, then as filed. Cross 31 miles southeast, Monroe Vortac, established on Victor 417 at or above 7,000. Climb and maintain 8,000. Contact Aero Center 123.45. 16 miles southeast, Monroe Vortac, blah, blah, blah. Clearance void if not off by 0030. If not off by 0030, advise Aero Center not later than 0040 of intentions. Verify this clearance will allow compliance with local traffic pattern and terrain or obstruction avoidance. Then they would say their initials, my initials, and hang up.
All right, that's very complicated. That's
Yeah.
that's one of the most complicated clearances I've ever heard.
Yep, yep. We had to do this Vicksburg departure day one. There's a particular instructor there at the academy. He doesn't mess around. He kicks you into gear like that first day. We had like 300 nav aids somewhere around 300 nav aids that we had to learn. Oh, by the way, since we're on the topic, do you know your chart symbology? Do you know what that actually is? Is this a radio beacon? Is it 80 or is it a fix, intersection, RNAV, VOR, VOR DME, VORTAC? What is it?
I know it's a mandatory VORTAC reporting point.
There you go. Mandatory reporting point, VORTAC. If you called it VOR, depending on the instructor or the evaluator, they could and are supposed to mark you off because it's not a VOR, it's a VORTAC. So you had to learn around 300 of those type of things, and you had to understand that it is a VORTAC, a VOR, a VOR DME, so on and so forth.
It's part of the bold method quizzes.
Yep, there you go. You can learn a lot from those guys. I love them. All right, so let's talk about that clearance that we just gave. So what did he want? I need a reminder. Somebody remember a couple of these things. All right, he's going to cross at or above 7. He's requesting 8,000. If you guys can just remember that he's 8,000 and Victor 417. I'm probably going to remember it now that I told you to remember it for me. So, All right, let me get my little handy dandy thing teaching majigger out. All right, so the basic route is he's going to depart Vicksburg, which is right here, VKS. He's going to join Victor 417 here, go into Monroe. Then I don't care where he goes after that because that's another sector's problem. And for those that just joined in, this line right here is the edge of our airspace. This is an approach control below here. The approach control owns 6,000 down to the surface. We own everything above. This is another center sector here called Monroe. So what we told him to do, in this case, Vicksburg is a Class Echo airspace all the way to the ground, even though it is not that way real world, but here in Disney World, it is. So we're allowed to tell them which way to depart as far as a runway, and we can we can instruct them to fly a heading without having to say before or upon entering controlled airspace or whatever the phraseology is. So what we do is we give them a vector to join the Victor 417. And if I remember correctly, it was 330, right? So they're going to depart out northeast, fly heading 330, join Victor 417, Victor 417 to Monroe, then as filed. So what kind of airspace do we have to protect from here? Somebody want to join in?
We're trying to keep them out of the approach airspace.
That's right. And approach owns 6,000 and below, so we have to miss that by how many feet?
1 foot.
1 foot. Yeah, well, in this case, remember, this is the kind of the concept I was talking about earlier. With non-radar, we're not protecting aircraft. Well, we are protecting aircraft ultimately, but your mindset has to be we're protecting against airspace. So in this case, we have to have them 1,000 foot above other airspace. So in this case, 7,000. So cross, how many miles away from Monroe should he cross at 7,000?
3-1 southeast at or above 7, climb and maintain 8.
There you go, which is what I issued, right? So 3-1 miles southeast of Monroe, right? There was one more bit that I said. Can you remember what I said specifically with that crossing restriction? I said established on Victor 417. Now the reason I say that is 3-1 miles from southeast of Monroe Vortac is like this. And you'll notice that it can be curving and could actually fall short sometimes from the actual boundary there. So we need to be very specific about the point that we need them to cross at. It's not just 3-1 miles southeast of Monroe Vortac, because that could be like right here. We need it to be specifically at this point. So we have to say the words established on Victor 417. And there's little guides that'll help you with that. And I'll show you some of those. And you'll learn to actually give these clearances by writing them down versus really thinking about all these like what do I want to say? Um, fine little details. There's ways that you can actually even trick your mind into saying these type of things automatically. So the restrictions are cleared from Vicksburg Airport to El Dorado Airport or whatever it was via depart northeast, turn left, fly heading 330 until joining Victor 417. Victor 417, Monroe, then as filed. Cross 3-1 miles southeast of Monroe Vortac, established on Victor 417, at or above 7,000. Climb and maintain 8,000. I know it sounds complicated, but did that make sense when I drew it all out?
Yeah, when you put it in context of airspace, it actually makes total sense.
Yep. So let me teach you kind of how they taught us to remember this stuff. Now, obviously, you have to memorize every aspect of this map. They give you a map with just the boundary drawn, and I think the nav aids are now drawn. And then you have to draw the lines, you have to draw the fixes, you have to label the fixes, you have to memorize every single one of these radials on the entire map. You have to know all the diamond mileages, the mileages for each segment of the airway, and then the total mileages on the airway. Um, then you have to know the frequencies, including the UHF frequency, and where the name of the approach is, and then the stratums that they have. And then you have to do the MIA map. MIA map is super simple. Now, that sounds pretty complicated, and it is. You're not going to do it. There's no way you could do this possibly without studying. However, you're going to see that there's a lot of patterns. For example, these three are separated by 15 degrees. So you just really need to memorize the first one, then add 15 degrees each time. That's more than half the work done for you. And then there's a few other like things, like you're going to remember the eastern airway is 090 plus 1. So 091. And I think, yep, that one's 15 degrees and that one's 15 degrees. So you just got to memorize this one and add 15 degrees. Now most of your circle's taken care of, or at least a good chunk of it. These are 15 degrees separated. So there's patterns everywhere, including the mileages on the segments. So it's not that hard. Now, going back to the strip that we were talking about, now that we drew that all out, you're probably maybe you thought it was like just me being stupid. You see that little dot right there? That was a little reminder that we were allowed to do to tell us to say established on whatever airway. We were allowed to put that dot there. And it kind of reminded us to say that phraseology. Then this little dot down here in the remarks section was our little reminder for saying verify this clearance will allow compliance with local traffic pattern and terrain or obstruction avoidance. And believe me, before the first week is done, you'll be saying that in your sleep. So we had little things like that that helped us. You'll also see a lot of red writing in here. The red writing is for pre-planning purposes. So 15 minutes before the session actually starts, you get 15 minutes of pre-planning. So if you saw this guy was traffic for somebody, even before he departed, and you're looking down here, then you can go ahead and write down all the crossing restrictions that you need. If he's not traffic with anybody, you just miss the airspace, which is basically all this is doing. This isn't missing any, because he's not traffic for any of these guys down here. You're just missing that airspace. So there you go.
When it comes in context of the map and all that, at what point do you lose the map as a crutch
Um,
and you're kind of committing all this to memory?
yeah, that happens pretty fast because you start running these problems. You'll run like 3 of these practice problems a day. That's actually after you already get into it. Before then, you have like 2 weeks of the instructor doing a million part task with you and calling you up to the whiteboard, and you all talk it out as a class. So you will get this down to the point where this map, and believe me, I'm not somebody who studies a lot. This map was just like the back of my hand. This map actually looks super simple nowadays. Um, it just will. I got to say, as long as you are studying, when you're supposed to be studying and you're actively participating in class, you will not have a problem memorizing this data. There were some things that, I memorized just for a test and then it kind of went away. I didn't need to know, for example, the segment mileages. I didn't use that a whole lot when it came to actually working the non-radar problems. But these diamond mileages, you'll absolutely have those down. You'll know every airway and how it's constructed. You'll know all of the waypoints along that airway by heart. Um, and what's great is you remember that little quick reference map? You're allowed to have this map on you during the eval. So all this information is there for you. If you have like a dumb brain fart types scenario, you're allowed to bring this up and reference it. But you won't have to that often, I promise you. If you do, you're a little bit in trouble. Like if you have to bring this up for every crossing restriction and stuff like that, you're going to get so far behind and you're not going to be able to catch up and you're going to have a lot of issues and a lot of write-ups on your eval. So yeah, not sure if I can cover too much more on the en route separation. Oops, here we go. So talking about earlier, generally speaking, you're protecting. You don't really need to know this too much as far as like a fun in practicing, but the FAA has determined how many miles on either side of the route that you kind of protect. And if I remember correctly, it's by default 4 miles. You get so far away from the nav aid, then it turns into, I think, 10 miles, something along those lines. So you have like a route that's 8 miles wide. As these routes collide together, there's some overlap between the routes, and that's the issue. That's where you have an airspace violation or a not an airspace violation. I'm sorry, a A1, which is a loss of separation. So this red checkered area is actually what you're trying not to happen. So you issue altitude restrictions at this point right here where they start coming together to make sure they're separated, and then make sure that they're separated on the other side as well. And then you can give whatever altitude you need from that point on. But there you go. I think,
Awesome.
yeah. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk now, I guess, about maybe more complicated things, arrivals, departures, which I think is kind of how we really need to be applying this stuff on VATSIM. We don't really do this en route stuff on VATSIM because we have radar coverage everywhere. But when it comes to arrivals and departures, we as a community, for the most part, we don't seem to do pretty very good with this stuff. Um, in fact, I'm going to do kind of a semi-impromptu thing. I made a CBT not too long ago that I'm going to bring up now for the Salt Lake Center, and I shared it, I think, on the VAT USA Academy. There it is, and hopefully it'll be implemented at some point down the road. So blocking airspace. Need to talk about this a little bit. All right, so when blocking airspace, what you're basically going to do is, let's see, let me see if I can apply this to the map we've been looking at. We have this airport down here, and if you remember, this is the border between our airspace down here and the next sector up here. You have this airport here, and if he wants to go depart this airport and fly up there towards Sidon and then so on, that airspace is going to get really close to their airspace and maybe even penetrate it. So if we drew a line straight from here to Sidon, you see that what would be 4 miles on either side of the route, it actually penetrates their airspace. So before you release this guy off the ground, you actually have to call this sector. Can somebody look up what GLH is? I cannot remember for the life of me. But we're going to call this sector and just chime in if you have it. So we call that sector, and what we do is we APRAC a block of airspace. So say that we're going to give this guy 7,000 to begin with. So maintain 7,000, expect 17,000 10 minutes
It's
after departure.
Greenville.
Greenville?
Yep.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much. So we'll call up Greenville low, Jackson low, APREC, 7,000 and below for a Byerly departure direct side-in. And what they do is they'll imagine this line right here, and they'll be like, okay, do I have any traffic for them? No? Okay. Block 7,000 and below approved. And now you get off the line and you can issue the clearance to this aircraft. And what this aircraft is going to do is he's going to depart, and he's only going to maintain, 7,000 until you radar identify him. Once you radar identify him, you can now do an actual point out, a radar point out of that target, climbing even higher, and then you tell them cancel the block at Byerly. If that doesn't make all that much sense, I'm going to go a little bit more into it. But how are we standing so far with what I just said? Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about it. All right, in this case, for example, I took a few of these examples from the Salt Lake airspace just because I'm familiar with it. However, these type of procedures can and should be being applied just about everywhere. If you don't have radar coverage all the way down to the ground, which you don't for most airports, I would say, especially in the mountainous areas, the first portion of a departure is, by definition, non-radar. Therefore, you need to treat it as a non-radar airspace. You need to block that airspace for that aircraft and don't let any of your radar targets in it. Similar to how you were trying to miss, for example, Monroe approach airspace, cross so many miles, whatever, at or above 1,000 foot above. That's exactly what you need to be doing for this type of airspace that you block yourself, even within your own sector. In this particular case, Eli Airport down here, or Ely, I don't know how you actually pronounce it. I've always called it Eli, but somebody recently tried to correct me. Has an airport down here in Sector 43's airspace. Sector 30 is the neighboring sector that the departure procedure goes up into. They then do a procedure turn around and come right back to Eli. What we have to do before departing this aircraft out of Eli, we have to call Sector 30 and APRAC a block of airspace to the initial altitude, and then maybe even tell him the Eli 2 departure so he knows exactly what airspace to block. What's going to happen is that sector, or the protected airspace, from 2.5 miles inside of our airspace all the way into theirs, up to and including the initial altitude, they're going to block 4 miles on either side of this route. So basically, they're not going to let any aircraft into this red box here. Does that make sense so far? Or any questions so far?
Looks good.
All right, thank you. And then you're going to depart him. Once he gets departed, chances are, before he even gets into this airspace, depending on what kind of radar coverage you have for this area, you're going to have a radar target. You will then have to first point the aircraft out just like you would anybody else and get that point out so that all he has to do is look for that target and keep aircraft away from that target. And immediately after he says point out approved, say, while I have you, cancel the Eli 2 block or whatever you would call this. And that way he doesn't have to block that airspace anymore. Now he's just blocking aircraft from a radar target. See if I can get anything else here. Same thing for an aircraft that won't be entering your airspace again. Sector 32, Carbon Airport. So you have a Carbon Airport departure, and he's going down here to Hanksville, and then even continuing further south. You're going to employ the same exact type of procedures, except instead of radar identifying them and pointing them out, probably just going to do a handoff. When they accept the handoff, call them and cancel the block. So here you would say 4632, It'll answer. You'll say block 7,000 and below for a carbon departure direct Hanksville. So they're going to block all this airspace here. Then you're going to release this guy, get him radar identified. So you basically own all of this airspace into Sector 46's airspace. You own all of that from 7,000 and below, technically. So you get them radar identified, say around here. You initiate a radar handoff. Then you call them and say, cancel the carbon block. And that's all you have to do. Does that make sense? Or any questions? There you go. Same type of thing could happen with an arrival. So for example, we spoke about Greenwood Airport there and the holding pattern for it. So let's say that you have an aircraft coming in from the north, and he's descending down. He wants to arrive Greenwood Airport. So you got this little block of, you got this block here. And what's happening here is that's a the hold in lieu of procedure turn protected airspace as well. So they're going to hit side in, they're going to go out here, do that whole course reversal, then shoot like the VOR, whatever approach into here. So you have to block that airspace because you know you're going to lose radar identification. You're going to lose radar contact with that aircraft sometime between the initial approach fix and the airport. So when they hit the initial approach fix, from that point on, I treat all of my arrivals as non-radar. In fact, I even freeze the data block over the airport, and I protect the last known. What do I want to say here? The last known altitude as he was descending for all of this around that airport, and then 4 miles around that airport. Not only do I protect that, but I also have to protect the missed approach pattern. So if there's a pattern that takes him out here and he comes back and holds, I have to protect that airspace as well because he's authorized to fly that. And then I have to protect all the way up to the altitude that he's cleared to for the missed approach if it's higher than the last known altitude. Now, this sounds maybe a little complicated. Maybe it's a little bit of a dumb moment for most of you. But what I see happening a lot, at least on the western coast where I do observe a lot of air traffic like procedures happening on VATSIM, is the aircraft will go down into here, and then you'll have another aircraft that's radar identified, and you'll let them just fly through that airspace because he's radar identified. Just because you have one aircraft that's radar identified and one that's non-radar does not mean that you don't have to protect this airspace. You cannot let anybody else go in there until you know this airspace is clear again. Not sure if I made that completely clear. Any questions on that? All right. Well, I don't know. I feel like I've been doing nothing but talking. Any questions? Any scenarios you guys want to bring up that you've seen you haven't really fully understood how to handle it? Maybe I don't either, but we can sit here and discuss it.
Yeah, I got one. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about so all those times you talk about protected airspace, all these times, you have a defined route, like a, published missed approach or a SID or whatever shit, that you can clearly protect, 4 miles from each side of the route. So you can protect that from, in the scenario where you have a non-radar guy and then you have other radar targets around, you just make sure they don't enter the protected airspace, right? But what if you have a scenario like, you were saying in the beginning where you told the guy, say, depart northeast, flighting, whatever, until intercepting, whatever, Victor route, blah, blah, blah. Right. What if you, in theory, had a guy doing that, non-radar, and then somehow had a radar target at the same altitude in that area? How would you protect that? Because it seems like but before he's on that Victor route, you don't really know where he is. He's just flying. You don't really know when he's going to turn or where he is.
Yeah, that is a phenomenal question. It's a question I actually asked myself when I was at the academy, and I'm not sure, Joseph, if you were here when I first started. I don't, and don't worry about like muting and stuff like that. I would really rather this be a discussion than me trying to give a class here.
Mm.
Um, so at the beginning, I said that I'm teaching you basically how to pass the academy and go from a VATSIM state of mind to an academy state of mind. I don't have the answer for everything. A lot of what I'm even teaching right now, they're not even using real world.
Mhm.
Um, I actually asked that same question when I was at the academy. I was like, "What do you do? Okay, then what if you have another guy that's just cruising along here?"
Mhm.
And the question was, "That's not going to happen," or I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
I
the
mean,
answer was,
yeah,
"That's not
pretty
going to
much.
happen."
Yeah.
I didn't
I'll be
like
back
that.
in a minute.
Mhm.
Yeah, sure.
It seems like
However,
they're, yeah.
now I asked a similar question when I got to my actual facility, and I had to deal with two. Let's see. So I had like similar to a Greenwood departure going down to Monroe, and then I had a Vicksburg departure going up here, basically to I think Little Rock and stuff is up here. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Um, so they're crossing traffic. Now I'm talking about a real world scenario here, and they said that the aircraft or the airports were just so far away that this wasn't an issue. But there was no clearly defined terms that were given to me.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like when it, like obviously a guy departing 30 miles away is okay, but what about 25 or 15 or 10? When do you
Right.
actually draw the line?
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Thankfully, and I think the reason being is because it's never an issue.
Mhm.
And I hate that answer. I really hate that I have to give you that answer. Believe me,
Yeah.
Joseph, because I was that person who's like, you say it's so crazy. I don't know if you were here earlier, but 10
I
minutes is
wasn't.
10 minutes. 090 is east, 091 is southeast. You are so particular, except when it comes to this.
Yeah,
Um,
right? Like there's
yeah.
so much specific shit in the 7110 for so much, and then this is just like
Now,
totally ambiguous.
Now, again, I am no expert here. There's somebody
Mhm.
out there that has that answer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I just don't know it.
Or maybe
Um,
there isn't. Maybe the FAA just doesn't know.
that's a strong possibility, I would say. But yeah, so what I'm going to suggest to you is, at least on the VATSIM network here, just do a really good estimate and keep him
Yeah.
clear of
Yeah,
that
that's the thing.
area. That's really what
Yeah.
you want to do.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I talked a lot about like specific 4 miles on either side of the route and stuff.
Mhm.
This is to give you an idea of the type of airspace you want to protect. And I think for the VATSIM purposes, it'll suffice just fine.
Yeah.
For those of you who are going to the Real World Academy, I'll tell you what they told me, and the scenario he just built, it won't happen. Move on, I guess. That's what I was always told, and I hated it. So
Right. Yeah. One scenario where it could happen, but this is kind of a terminal thing, and when you get into this, what I've learned talking to real world guys is terminal and en route non radar seems to be taught completely differently
yes,
in the world. And the terminal one does not seem at all substantiated by the 7110. They just kind of say how to do it. But they're all the time, releasing guys off untowered airports, non-radar on headings, either in a class E, giving them a hard heading with consent, or class G, when enter control airspace flighting, blah blah blah.
right.
That is a case where you could have a guy flying around at the same altitude that departure is climbing to, and I guess, yeah, my question would be how close can they get until you ID that guy? And I don't think I have not found an answer to that either. And I know, but that's kind of in the weeds because Terminal doesn't really follow any of the rules we went over today at all with
So
non-radar.
talking a little bit about what you just said, the upon entering controlled airspace, fly this heading,
Uh-huh.
or depart this and fly this heading. Those are so you'll read in the 7110. In fact, I just had a discussion a couple hours ago with a friend of mine about this particular thing. Just because the 7110 says you can do this, for example, for class echo to the ground surface area, you
Mm.
can tell an aircraft to depart a certain direction and fly heading without saying when entering controlled airspace. However, you're not going to do that real world unless you have the procedures already established for you. For example, at the academy, it specifically told us that at Vicksburg you have uh, two options as far as headings to fly to join Victor 417. If you can't do what you need to do with those two headings, the aircraft just incurs a delay on the ground. Um, If so, it's 330 and 010. I think are the two headings we can issue out of here. If you can't do what you need to do with those headings, you don't issue that heading and you wait until you can do it, right? So I'm assuming that's kind of what follows through with real world. Just don't do it. What they've done is, if it's in that procedure, the FAA has evaluated that those headings and the common route taken and how long it takes an aircraft to turn and so on and so forth, at what altitude they turn, what's the climb rates at in this area, what obstacles are around there. They've evaluated it and they said this is safe. So
Hmm.
unless you have that information available to you at your facility, I don't know. This is me. This is me personally. I am no expert. Again, I'm going to suggest you just don't be doing that. Issue as filed as much as possible.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, and that just gets into again the whole like how terminal does things completely differently.
Mhm.
And I mean, honestly, for the network, I mean, it seems almost seems kind of necessary to just kind of mirror that, like in terminal, do it like they do it terminal real world, because a lot of like congested terminal satellite airspace is like A80, for example, which is really the only one I'm super familiar with. Is I mean, it just wouldn't work if you couldn't pretty much give anyone whatever heading you want off these fields, which is basically what they do, to my understanding. There is no SOP or anything like that for what you were describing in their
Hmm.
at their facility. They just kind of do
That's
their thing.
interesting to me
And
then.
I've talked to multiple people who work there, who work the satellite, and they do not have an answer as to how they protect these people in these settings. They just kind of, if it looks close, keep them 1,000 above, and if it looks okay, then
Yep. I gotta say that a lot of controllers, real world, most of them, they they know the rules that are applicable to let them do this job.
yeah,
They
exactly,
generally
right.
speaking are not enthusiasts or geeks about it like us who want to
Hmm.
dive so
Yeah,
into the word. In
for
fact,
sure.
at real world, whenever I start asking these type of questions, I kind of get made fun of actually,
Yeah, right. Like, who
and a
cares?
little bit,
You'll never need
yeah,
to know this.
a little bit of eye rolling action going on, and
Hmm.
that's fine. It's not for everybody,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean,
but the thing is, if they needed to know it, if it was unsafe, I guarantee you they would know it.
exactly.
So
Yeah, I mean, nobody's dying.
I'm just gonna throw it out there. Airports have been evaluated for diverse departures. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say that?
Yeah,
Uh,
DVA.
yeah. So, oh no, no, no. That's diverse vector area. So yeah,
Oh, you're
that
talking
that
about
would
someone
be,
else.
yeah, a diverse departure, and I
Mhm.
won't be able to quote it exactly, but it's basically my understanding that the FAA has evaluated it, and they said an aircraft may depart and turn any direction and do a standard rate climb, all the way to the published MEA in any direction, and it's not a problem. So you got a lot of these down in Florida, for
Oh, I
example.
thought that is it. I thought that is what a DVA is, or is that some? What's the
Ooh,
difference?
a DVA is, for example, yeah, it's a little area. Actually, let me just go ahead and pull up the Salt Lake one, for example.
Mm. Yeah, I haven't worked with DVAs in a while because none of the ZTL airports really have them. It's mostly I remember on the West Coast though they have a ton.
So here we have I'll just go ahead and do the thing. All right, here we have the 4 runways at Salt Lake, and the normal departure path is either straight out or they start doing a turn, um, heading 280 out like that, right?
Yeah,
And then these MVAs can kind of get high. You got 6,000 here, then it quickly gets
yeah,
to 8,000. And
mm,
what the FAA has done is they've evaluated a certain amount of airspace off the departure end of the runways off to a
yeah,
certain degrees, and they
mm,
say that as long as you issue a heading inside of this box here, you're allowed to issue these headings with the aircraft being below the MVA.
yeah,
This
right.
is a diverse vector area.
Mm. Yeah, that sounds familiar. I just haven't worked with that in a while. And then, but the thing you were talking about, the other thing, the diverse departure thing is different.
Yeah, so the diverse departure means that an aircraft can depart an airport and literally fly any heading, any direction on departure, as long as they maintain a standard IFR climb rate,
Gotcha.
and they will be clear of any obstacles. So
That makes sense.
what I'm thinking is a lot of these terminals, maybe, and I'm only guessing here, and somebody's probably gonna see this video later and be like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. But I'm just gonna go ahead and throw it out as a guess. Maybe those headings that they're issuing, they know they're allowed to issue any heading they want, probably because of something similar to this. The field has been evaluated, and there's no restrictions necessary for them.
Yeah, that might be the case. I do know for sure, at least at Atlanta, there are a couple headings off a couple airports they don't like to give just due to obstacles. Now, I don't know if that is more just concerned about an MVA down the line, or yeah, I'm not sure the technicality there. I have definitely never heard any of them describe this to me, so they probably don't know about that. But again, like you said, people know the rules that they need to know.
All right, so
So,
with that, go ahead.
sorry, there's a part in the 7110 about vectors below the minimum altitude that includes, as far as I can read, it's 563. That just says basically, as far as I'm reading it, the only restriction is that you don't vector them towards a prominent obstacle displayed on the scope.
Okay, it was 563.
6.3. The bottom
Yeah,
of
so
the
that's
vectors.
basically the paragraph that lets you get away with giving headings off the ground when you don't have a DVA, is my understanding.
Look at that, the very last one. At those locations where diverse vector areas have been established, radar vectors may be given below the NVAMI within the DVA described in facility directives.
Yeah. So
So
DVA
this
just
will be
basically
described in your directives, though. So there you go. All right. So I know some of you guys came through after we were done talking about the en route separation thing, but I have a scenario for you guys. And specifically, I want to know if Austin is still here. Did I put you to sleep yet?
Hello.
Hello. Hi. All right. So I have this scenario. Get a pen and paper ready, notepad or whatever. Not really actually sure you need a pen and paper, but here it is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you guys look at this. And I'm going to put this like that. And that should be all the information you need, okay? This is your scenario. Actually, you don't even need... Stand by just a minute. Yep, you don't need that. So I could just zoom in like this. There you go. Here's your diverging distance minima there. And this is your scenario. Aircraft are at flight level 250, 25. You got two aircraft here, November 987, November 123. They're scheduled to arrive at Boise Vortac within the 10-minute time frame. So they are traffic for each other. Consider them basically arriving there at the same exact time, okay? Give a crossing restriction, a descending crossing restriction, that is, to November 123 that clears them of November 987. And then as a bonus point, get November 123 back up to flight level 250 when it's safe. All the information you should need is right here. I am going to start let's say 7 minutes. You should be able to do this in 7 minutes. Then I'm going to go grab a drink, and I'll be back in the 7-minute mark. And we'll talk about how you came to the conclusion, if you were wrong, why you were wrong, and we'll talk about the answer. And that's any questions before I start the timer?
Nope.
All right, and go. I should also say that I want you to do it by the minimum separation needed. Minimum. Don't go overboard with crossing restrictions.
Okay, so J15, J54. So it's 23 miles. So I'm to 25. So I'm going to call it 11. So 987 has to be file level 240, 11 prior to
Well,
Boise.
hold on. Wait. So I'm sorry. I was kind of hoping like every person can work on it separately, and then we'll talk about
Oh,
it at the end. Yeah. And I'll be right back. All right, so that's 7 minutes. However, this is a completely relaxed discussion. Does anybody want more time?
I can show you what I worked out here if you'd like.
Absolutely.
For that distance
Actually,
math.
Austin, since you've been here basically from the start, actually, although we lost everybody who wasn't here from the start, basically, other than Nick here. So, I kind of want to go from the bottom up. Mr. Polak, I'm sorry. How do you say your name?
Oh, like it's fine.
Okay. Do you want to discuss what you got?
Sure. Okay, so I got November 123 cross 15 miles northwest of Boise at flight level 240, cross 13 miles southeast of Boise at flight level 240, then climb and maintain flight level 250.
Okay. And Nick, did you partake in this?
I did, but I don't know if I got the bonus point. So I'll just tell you what I have. November 123. Cross. Or correction. November 123. Descend and maintain. Flight level. 240. 15 miles northwest of Boise Vortex, and that's what I've got. I would then issue a climb and maintain instruction 15 miles after or southwest of Boise Vortex.
Or southeast, rather.
Oh yeah, correct.
And you said 15 miles. So the other one was descend and maintain flight level 240, 15 miles northwest. So 15 miles northwest, right?
Correct. Yep, correct.
And then the second instruction would be
climb and maintain 250
after 15 miles.
Yes.
Okay. And Douglas, you want to give it a shot? And what was that distance? I'm sorry. 13? Okay. And yep. Okay. And Austin, what was yours?
I'll even show you my work.
Oh. Here, let me share your screen through my screen. Oh boy.
and you can tell me if I'm wrong. So just thinking out loud here.
All
So for
right.
J50
The bottom
to
of it is
J50,
cut off though.
it'll scroll.
Oh, okay, cool. Go ahead.
Okay, so for J15 to J54, I have 23 degrees, so that's 20-degree divergence. So my math, and then 26 degrees, we're going to use 25 degrees divergence, or 25 required.
Okay.
So November 98713 northwest at 240, then 11 northeast at 240, climb and maintain flight level 250.
All right. So we got varying responses. I want to say I'm going to close yours out now. So wait, yours 987 cross. The restriction was supposed to be for November 123, but that's okay. It still works.
Wait. Wait.
Okay, that's fine. Number 123, same thing. Yeah, exactly. So number 123 cross 13 miles northwest of Boise Vortex. Add and maintain 50240 or
Yep.
okay. Cross 11 miles or 11 miles northeast Boise. Now, how'd you get the 11 there?
So I'm thinking then since it's 20 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to go off a 25-degree divergence requirements, which would be 11.
I see. Okay. All right, and I want to hear Douglas's one more time. So I'm going to close you out. Who are you, Austin? All right, Douglas. I want to hear yours one more time. Okay, so you have it the most correct. However, you're mixing up your northwest, northeast. That's all. So, all right. So the actual answer will be. I'll go ahead and bring it over. We didn't focus too much on phraseology here. So where can I put this to where you guys can read it? Can you guys read that okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So the most basic will be, without the bonus question to get them back up, the most basic is cross 15 miles northwest of Boise Vortac at and maintain flight level 240. The bonus, though, is cross 15 miles northwest of Boise Vortac at flight level 240. Then maintain flight level 240 until 13 miles east. Well, in this case, northeast. Sorry. When I wrote this up, I was doing it for practicality, not academy stuff. Until 13 miles northeast. So I can go ahead and just fix that now.
Oh,
Northeast.
you know what? I used the below flight level 180.
Did you? Yep, I
that's
figured.
exactly what I
Yep.
did.
All right. So yeah, we're dealing with 2.4s, the class alpha airspace, so flight level. So cross 15 miles northwest of Boise Vortac at flight level 240. Maintain flight level 240 until 13 miles northeast, because you are right, Doug. The 087 technically would be northeast, even though here it looks like it's southeast of Boise Vortac. Climb and maintain flight level 250. So why did we do that? The difference between the courses on the western side, so over here, Boise is 23 degrees. Okay. And then if you read the 65 there, we have to use 20 degrees because there is no 23 degrees. So if it's between two numbers, you use the lower of the degrees divergence to give you a higher mileage. So they're actually erring on the side of safety, you see? So you use 20 degrees in that case, which ends up being 15 miles. But yeah, Austin, had it been below 50180, you would have been 100% correct. And then where's the other thing? Sorry. So if there's no questions there, then all we have to do is, for the bonus point, is tell them to maintain flight level 240 until 13 miles northeast of Boise Vortac, climb maintain flight level 250. Now I think it was who was it? I think it was Nick. Nick, you said 15 miles on this side. Do you remember how you got that?
I do not. I was just gonna go 1.5 on both.
I see.
Yeah. Nope. That was wrong on my part.
Okay, not a problem. So I'm sorry, the degrees difference is 26 degrees on the, what do you call it? The eastern side, really. So it's 26 degrees between 087 and 113. And if that's the case, that means it's between 25 and 30. So we use the 25 here, which is 13 miles. So maintain 13 miles. I'm sorry, maintain flight level 240 until 13 miles northeast of Boise Vortac. Now you can climb and maintain flight level 250 to get you back on course. So I did a little graphic that kind of shows that. So right here, 15 miles northwest of Boise Vortac, they're clean. 14.9999999 miles, they're now in conflict. You see? So you tell them to cross at 15 at a safe altitude. Not descending. There are times that I've proposed this ordeal to some people before. And what they did is they didn't give a crossing restriction, believe it or not, to the first crossing here. They'll tell November 123 descend and maintain, which I was scared you were going to do because the way you did it, Nick, at the first. Number 123 descend and maintain flight level 240 until 13 miles south, or I'm sorry, 13 miles northeast of Boise Vortex, climb maintain flight level 250. And the thing is, the issue with that is, I hope all of you can see that that means that aircraft is not going to be deconflicted with him on the western side. He's going to descend right through him, really. So there you go. That is en route non-radar in a nutshell. I hope this was helpful. There's all kinds of things we can talk about. I can literally be here for the next 2 days talking about these like rules up here. The 44 knot rule, the 22 knot rule, degrees divergence on departures. So basically what this is saying, before I go into this, any questions about what we just did, that little scenario? I hope it was interesting for you guys at least. And all of you basically got generally speaking, the right answer. I think all of them would have been safe. Nick over restricted by 2 miles, and it's better to over restrict than under restrict. So everybody would have been safe there. All right, so the 44 knot rule, all this stuff. What this allows you to do is basically allows you to get more aircraft shoved into an area or a segment of their route than what would normally be allowed with non-radar procedures. Non-radar procedures is by default 20 miles, or I'm sorry, 20 miles separation or 10 minutes of separation. And if you're able to, using miles actually gets you more aircraft in the same amount of airspace than 10 minutes for the most part. If you want to get even more aircraft in there, for example, if the lead aircraft is 22 knots faster, that reduces down to 5 minutes or 10 miles. If the aircraft's 44 knots faster, that's 3 minutes and 5 miles. And that could be helpful at times if you have two aircraft going off, say, off Victor 74 going to Greenville here. And November 1 is 44 knots faster than November 2. And they don't have, and they're estimating Greenville at sometime within 10 minutes of each other, less than 10 minutes of each other, and they're at the same altitude. Well, Greenville is going to want to know what the heck is going on here. But in this case, you could call them and say, Greenville, Jackson, Low, November 1 and November 2 separated using the 44 knot rule. And they'll say, okay. And there you go. Does that make sense right there? All right.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if it's dumb or not.
Please.
Though.
Please ask all the questions you want. I want this to be a discussion.
If the aircraft is no longer 44 knot faster, and they are, they're now it's like the 22 knot rule, right? Do you have to notify? Was it Greenville?
Yeah, absolutely.
Of that change. Okay.
Yeah, and there is a rule somewhere that says that this is all based off of their filed true airspeed. Okay. So we have access to that. It's not what they're actually flying right then, because non-radar, at least at the academy, we're not assigning speed restrictions. Okay. Right. That is something your facility will teach you, and it's rarely used in a non-radar environment, except Oceanic, which figures one of the guys that are doing this and recording it actually wanted to know more about this stuff because of his Oceanic procedures over there. In this case, if the pilot for some reason cannot maintain, I think it's 10% plus or minus of their filed true airspeed, they're supposed to notify ATC so that we can change their filed true airspeed on their flight data. And then you start using that new speed accordingly. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, good. This one's actually really cool, and we could use this all the time on the VATSIM network, these last two here. If This is departure versus departure. Let's say you have this little airport out in the middle of nowhere and you got a group flight flying out of there because, that some pilots are awesome like that, right? Um, and you want to, but they're all going to like different areas.
Hey, gentlemen, I gotta hop off for work, so I will talk to you later. Kyle, thank you very much for the discussion.
Yeah, not a problem, man. I'll talk to you later.
Yep.
So this would be probably like the last concept I really cover here. We'll call it Byerly Airport. One guy wants to go off to the north, one guy wants to go out here, and so on and so forth. But you have one guy going to Sidon and one guy going to, say, Nashville, which is just a little bit more north of that. So what you could do, departure versus departure, for separation, if the courses are going to diverge by 45 degrees or more immediately after takeoff, then you only need 1 minute between those departures. So say that November 1 departed at 1200 exactly. November 2, who is going north versus November 1 going directly east, and he has been assigned a heading of 45 degrees or more that differs from the first guy, he could be released at 1201. You do not have to wait 10 minutes to release him. Does that make sense right so far?
To me, yes.
Okay. What about you, Doug? I know you're recording this, so I want it to make sense for yours. And then if they're not going to diverge by 45 degrees or more immediately after takeoff, but they will within 5 minutes of takeoff, so say that they all fly the standard departure and then they get to a point within 5 minutes, then they go off to their on-course areas. Then it does increase to 2 minutes, but that's still way better than that 10-minute restriction. So that's pretty cool. And then you could just release all of them. Number 1, 2, 3, or November 1, release for departure. You get the time that he departed. Hopefully, when he checks in with that, at least at the academy, they do. Then, if it's 1 minute after that, you can immediately release November 2. Then you get November 2's departure time when he checks in, airborne. Then, based off of that, how many minutes after that, you can release the next guy, so on and so forth. You can get a lot of people out using that method. Issue is, though, on VATSIM, most of the time, if you have a group flight coming out of a non-towered field, they're all going exactly the same route, so you can't use that. You have to use the 10 minutes ordeal. All right, from this point, man, I don't have anything else I could really talk about without going horribly into detail. And I have no interest in doing that unless somebody has a specific question. So really open up the floor, ask anything you wanted to be asking. All right. Sounds good. Well, I kind of